All right, so my name is Tracy Ginn, and I teach here in the College of Business at East Carolina University. I'm also active in the nonprofit world as well, though. I have been a Boy Scout leader for many, many years, and a Girl Scout leader for even longer than that, and actually have leadership roles outside of just being a troop leader within the organization for Girl Scouts as well. So I know what it's like to have to, tell your story over and over again and try to get people to understand your story. I also work with seniors in the College of Business here, and my job there is to get them ready to interview. So it's all about telling your story. All right, we're always talking about how to answer that question, why should I hire you, which is where they need to tell their story, right? And the first thing I tell them is it's not because you have the skills and experience for the job. Like, that's your resume, that's what got you in the door. Your why is what's going to get you the job, though. That's your story. Okay, and so that's why, I took that approach in putting this presentation together today, because your why is what will get people to actually want to buy in and work and make contributions, donations to your organization. It's not the facts and figures that you're giving them that they could just go pull up if they want to dive into the numbers, better. So today's presentation will be all about, the art of telling your story. So I'm going to start with a case study. There's an organization called Charity Water that, was out telling their story about providing clean water to, drinking water to communities in need across the globe. Maybe you've heard of them, maybe not, but a lot more people now have heard of them. For sure. Their message was all about empowering communities by putting in sustainable water infrastructure, and they would partner with local organizations to get that done. Their mission, as they said here, is to transform lives by providing access to clean water, one of the most fundamental human needs. All right, so if I ask you to open your pocketbook right now and make a donation to Clean Water, or Charity Water, who's doing it? You're like me, I was at Winter Jam the other day and I was like, adopt a child? Sure. I do that, right? I have a very giving nature, but just based off this, that's a good story, but, story, I'd say loosely, but there's a lot more that goes into pulling at those heartstrings and wanting to get people to donate their time or donate their hard-earned money, especially in today's economy. I don't know about y'all, but people are not buying $6 boxes of Girl Scout cookies. Times are tough, but we're still trying, so if you see a Girl Scout, buy that box. All right, so if we look at their numbers then, Charity Water has provided clean water to over 12 million people in 29 countries. It's improved the lives of over 12 million people, enabling them access to safe, reliable drinking water, and they funded water projects in 29 different countries across various regions and communities. Are we wanting to open our purse now? It doesn't really, drive me anymore, right? There's no story there. But what they do now, if you pull up their website, you will find that there are tons of stories and tons of pictures, like this young lady here, who's got access to clean water now. And it all started with a 9-year-old girl, okay? Her name is Rachel Beckwith. Rachel was turning 9 years old back in 2011, I believe it was, and she did a Facebook fundraiser, okay, where she wanted people to, instead of buying her presents that year, she wanted people to make a donation to Charity Water to provide clean drinking water to people. Her goal was to raise $300, so very grassroots, right? She raised $220, so didn't quite meet her goal, but she did raise some money. And then unfortunately, she passed away not long after that in a car accident. Yeah. But what happened is people found her donation campaign on Facebook and started a GoFundMe and raised over $1 million for Charity Water because of her story. Okay? Her story resonates globally, where you've got, a young girl that's trying to make sure that people around the world get access to something as basic as safe drinking water. But it also illustrates how that personal story behind it. Because if I tell you a 9-year-old was working hard to make sure that other kids had access to clean drinking water, and she didn't quite meet her goal, but she was able to raise $220, I mean, that's why we've got our girls at the cookie booths, right? Selling you cookies and telling you all the fun things that they do because their story sells. And we practiced that the other week, put it to a challenge. We were at Walmart, and I had my daughter and her best friend who were old enough to run a booth by themselves, okay? They need to have an adult there. But we were standing across the Walmart, my best friend and I, who were co-leaders, and we were like, let's test this. We could still see them. Y'all sell here, we'll sell there. Nobody wanted to buy cookies from me and my bestie. They wanted to talk to the two girls that were telling them all the fun things they were doing as a Girl Scout, right? We want that story. That's what's got you paying $6 for a box of cookies. Not the fact that Christina and I are standing there and tired and cold and buy them so we can go home. All right, so another story that Charity Water uses now is this young lady's story. You think of something as simple as sanitation and hygiene and how it can change lives. This young lady was at a school in one of these communities and learned the importance of hand washing. All right, she went home, told her dad. She saw him not washing his hands before they were eating supper, and she said to him, "Dad, you need to wash your hands." And you know what he did? He slapped her. And she said, "I'm just telling you what I learned at school." So the next day, he goes to her school. He's like, "What are you teaching my child?" And so the teacher there explained the importance of hand washing and the lesson that was being taught to, the children. And he went home and apologized to his daughter and saw the importance of school and said, to the teacher, "Please tell me if she doesn't show up. School is very important. She needs to know that." Because now he understood that, something as simple as clean hands could help prevent the spread of disease throughout the whole community. So that story, for telling it, and that's one of just a handful that are up there on their website, makes me more likely to want to donate to the organization. So, what we want to do then is have you lead with people. All right, I want you focusing on the individuals, the communities that you're serving, and not just your organization. You need to make it personal by sharing stories of the impact that you've had in your community. And you want to connect that storytelling to action, whether it's through getting people to open their purse, to donate their time, whatever that action is that you need them to get. Because if I just stopped with telling the young lady's story that got slapped, you'd be like, "Oh wow, that was harsh," right? But if I tell you instead a donation of $10 helps make sure that this community gets clean drinking water, I've now put an action behind it, and you know what you need to do to help. Okay? So we need to make it personal and connect that storytelling to action. And the way I go about doing this with the seniors that I teach is not something that I created, and it's not something that this gentleman, Simon Sinek, created either. He's the first one to tell you that. Okay, as a matter of fact, the Truist Leadership Institute also teaches something very similar to this. Their leadership model is that beliefs drive behaviors, and behaviors drive results. They start with beliefs. This is very similar to Simon Sinek's Golden Circle, and he's got a book called Start With Why, where he goes into detail about this, where we start with our why, then we go to our how and our what. Now, the problem is, most of us are so used to, when it comes to telling our story, starting with the what. And there's a reason for that, right? We like to give those facts and figures, be it the product sold, the services offered, or what it is that we do in our role at the nonprofit. But that's not getting anybody, that's the facts and figures that I started the presentation with. Okay, what we need to get to instead is the other end of the spectrum. Now our how would be our strengths, our values, our driving principles, but our why is our purpose, our cause, and our beliefs. We need that to come through. Now that doesn't mean that your what is not important, because your organization doesn't exist unless it's doing a what, right? We need the what. You need all three of these, but we've got to have them in the right order. And there's a reason that we struggle with this, and it goes back to biology. Okay, we've got two parts in the brain, right? The limbic brain and the neocortex. Y'all didn't know y'all were getting a biology lesson today, did you? Okay. So our neocortex is that outer part, and it is responsible for all of our rational and analytical thought, and it has the most access to language. So when we're exploring facts and figures, that's the part of the brain that you're using, is that neocortex. But the limbic system is the older part, and it is responsible for all the feelings, like trust, loyalty. It's responsible for all human behavior and decision making. But this last part's the reason why we struggle with telling our story, right? It lacks the capacity for human language. Doesn't mean it's not possible, it really struggles with putting it into words. Think about it in terms of, what I tell my students that are all out hoping to get jobs because they're graduating in May. I say to them, you can put it into words, what's on your resume. That's your facts and figures, right? Your what. But at the end of the day, why is someone going to hire you over someone else? Out of all the hiring that I ever did in 20 years as an international investment banker, what would happen is we would sit in a room and we would decide after a group had interviewed people, which one we wanted to go with, who we wanted to extend an offer to. And 9 times out of 10, someone would say something along the lines of, my gut tells me, I feel like, right? And that's because we're talking about that limbic part of the brain that struggles with putting words to it. We just know. And that's because that limbic part of the brain is where that survival instinct is, right? So it's had to make those really quick connections through the years to make sure that we live, right? So it's got the emotions and the feelings and the trust and all that built into it, but it really struggles with putting words into it. But that's what we need to do, is to be able to put words to your story, right? So that you can appeal to the limbic part of the brain of the people that are hearing your message. So it's super important. Because as Simon mentioned, people don't buy what you do, right? They buy why you do it. So we have to communicate that why. All right, so when it comes to mission first storytelling and why that works is because we're tapping into the emotional drivers, right? That portion of the brain. By leading with the why behind your work, you can cultivate deeper connections with supporters and build a stronger brand identity, inspire longer-term engagement. I want the person that's going to come year after year and buy boxes of cookies from me, not someone that's going to buy a one-off box at the grocery store, right? And I have those customers. There are Girl Scouts that will walk up and buy cases, lifetime members, because they bought into the why, right? We need people to buy into our why. All right, so let's work on yours. All right, I gave y'all all worksheets. We're going to start with this first part of it in step 1, where I want you to take a few minutes and define your why. It's not easy. You don't have to have a perfect answer by the end of today. All right, so I want you to think about, in terms of doing that, why does your nonprofit exist? One part of it. Okay, let me make sure I can't see my notes from up here, so I want to make sure I'm covering everything. All right, so we want to talk about why your organization exists here. If your organization wasn't here tomorrow, what would happen? Like, what's the world going to lose out on if we wake up in the morning and your organization doesn't exist anymore? And what emotions do you want people to feel when they engage with your mission? So take a couple of minutes and just think about that. All right, so if you're in the education space, this is what's referred to as a think, pair, share activity. Everybody's favorite, right? So now what I want you to do is find a partner in the room and share what you wrote with each other. Okay. Would anybody like to share theirs? Yes. Yes, please, so everybody can hear you. You're amongst friends, come on. Anyone else want to share theirs? Sharing. Okay. That's the volunteer table back there. I love it.
Hi, I'm Sam. I'm also with Catholic Charities. So I've
Okay. Alright, so that's to get you thinking, right, and trying to put things in terms of your why. It's not like you can share yours, yes. So she jumped right ahead to telling the story, and I love it. I mean, I don't love that that happened to you, but you are certainly well on your way to the next couple of exercises we're going to go through. You've got a great, unfortunately, a great story to share, to really get people to want to take action. So let's work on that, here in the next couple of exercises then. All right, anyone else wanting to share theirs? I don't want to take away. All right, here's another example. The Laundry Project. Have y'all heard of them before? I actually was Googling this to try to find out more information about them, and there are instances of the Laundry Project throughout the country. All right, there's several of them, but they lead with their why. All right, so instead of focusing on what they do, which is basically paying for people to clean their laundry, I mean, that's pretty basic, but if we were standing out front of the laundromat saying, hey, we're taking donations to wash people's clothes, be like, why don't they pay for it, right? Like, why am I opening my purse for that? So instead, they share personal accounts of parents who couldn't afford to wash their children's clothes for school, and how a simple act of doing laundry gave them the confidence and a sense of normalcy. So a mother that they helped actually said, my kids were embarrassed to go to school because of their dirty clothes, but now they can walk in with their heads held high. And this is an issue, in our communities. Clean clothes, why this works, something as basic as clean clothes, that means dignity, right? So they don't just provide laundry services, they're restoring self-worth. And this emotional storytelling has led to increased donations and volunteer engagement because people connect with the real, everyday struggles of those that they help. All right, so now we want to get to your organization's why and your story. Okay, so think about a specific story of someone your nonprofit helped that helps illustrate your mission. And we want to take a storytelling approach here in the next few minutes to telling what it is that you do, much like we just heard up here, if you were able to hear all of that a while ago. So we want to use a mission-first storytelling approach. I want y'all to leave here in your next donor appeal equipped with a story that you can share and hopefully drive more donations or more volunteers coming into your organizations. All right, so the key elements. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was going to ask, and I don't know how many other people in the room experience this. In my role in the organization, I'm not frontline. I'm not interacting with the people that receive our services. So do you have an idea, an action that I can take back to equip those that are working with clients to capture stories, to provide them to me so that I can share them with the community? That's my biggest barrier right now.
Yeah.
And if you have any practical tips.
Yeah, so that could be something as simple as a meeting where you're talking to people and saying, hey, share your stories. I know a friend of mine used to run the daycare at the local Y. And so that's one of the things that she would do. Instead of having a meeting where everybody had to be in the same room, she would send emails out and ask other people to respond to those with sharing a story. It was meant to help motivate those within the organization. It was like a Friday morning, devotional that had a story attached to it that she was incorporating. But, it did just that. It also gave them a bank of stories that they could use.
Follow-up question. Do you have like a good template? Not everyone is good at telling stories.
Right.
So is there a good template that you can share either after this or just to give them something tangible so that they're providing the key pieces of information? So the last thing I want to do is make up information to round out a story.
Yeah.
So maybe having a template to share with them.
And that's what we're going to do here in this next step 2. So we're on the same page. Yeah. All right. Okay. So the key storytelling elements that we need to have then are emotion, authenticity, and action. Okay? So if we start with the emotion, it says here, great nonprofit stories move people to action by focusing on the emotional impact or the cause. So if I were in your shoes and I was sending a message out to my employees, I would say, we need more stories. You can help us out. This is the template I want you to use when you're telling your story. I want you to start with the emotion, and I want it to have authenticity. You could, give them this slide, basically, and I'll make sure this gets shared as well, and then move on to the action. And if they don't have the action in there, that's something that you could put into it. At least you've got the emotion and the authenticity to it. All right, so they need to be real and relatable. Like you said, you don't want to be making things up, right? That's not, giving credibility to your organization. So having their authentic voices and avoiding jargon, just tell them, give it to me in your own words. It doesn't have to be fancy, it doesn't have to be polished. Like, we'll put words behind it once you give me the details of the story to share, right? And it doesn't have to be, we're not going to ChatGPT and saying, give me a fancy story, about this. It's not, lots of adjectives and things like that. That's not what's selling. And then the action. This is probably something that you on your end would be doing more of. Every great nonprofit story is going to end with a clear call to action. And that was, like we said a while ago with the water example, donate $10 today. At the World Vision, donation appeal that I heard the other night at Winter Jam, it was donate $29 right now, and here's a picture of the kid that you're adopting when you do that. So that, was really tying into the emotion. I got her story. I got an action, how much money I needed to donate to make a difference. And it was authentic as well. Like, every individual got one child that they were able to adopt. It wasn't just a flyer, being passed out that was generic. Okay. So I want y'all in your worksheets then to apply that. If you know of a story, how would you, if you were looking to respond to that email that I mentioned where we're asking folks for stories, if you have a story from your organization of someone or people that you have helped, give us the setup, the challenge, and the resolution on that. So we're going to start with Act 1, which is the setup. Okay, so here, what I want you to do is introduce the person, describe their world, and give a hint at the challenge that they were facing. So I know I gave you a limited block there to write in. You can use the back of the sheet if you need more room. But let's start with Act 1 and take a second to focus on the setup for your story. All right, so in the interest of time here, I know I've got 5 more minutes on my schedule. We'll move on to the next one too, which would be Act 2, and that's the challenge that's being faced. Okay, is it financial hardship? Is it social discrimination? Is it environmental challenge? What is it that that person that you wrote about in Step 1, what hardship are they facing? All right, so for example, in Act 1, I may have said something like, Maria is an 8-year-old girl who loves school, but she struggles because she doesn't have reliable access to books at home. So then if I'm talking about her in this Act 2, where I'm talking about the challenges she's facing, I may say something along the lines of, without books to read, Maria was falling behind in her class and losing confidence. Right, that's the obstacle that she's facing. So then we move to Act 3, which is the resolution, and that's where your organization comes in. What is your organization doing to help the person that you're writing about overcome those obstacles? All right, so what can the audience that you're talking to, in this case, do something to help others like Maria? That's where we end with something like, thanks to our community support, Maria now has books to read every night. Her reading level has improved and she dreams of becoming a teacher one day. In an example of a bland before message I've got here for you, our nonprofit provides tutoring services to underprivileged students in the community. That's a great thing, right? But again, that's not something that's getting me to want to go sign up to tutor or to, open my pocketbook. So an engaging story that really drives at the emotion and gets someone to want to be involved would be, when 10-year-old Jake started school, he struggled with reading. His confidence plummeted and he started avoiding classes. But thanks to our tutoring program, Jake now reads at his grade level and even volunteers to read aloud in class. Every child deserves that chance. Just $25 provides a month of tutoring for a child like Jake. Will you help? Now I'm like, yeah, I can spare $25. That's a couple of cups of coffee from Starbucks, right? I want Jake to be reading to his classmates and helping out. All right, so I want y'all to take a minute or two and try to reframe your story there in that step 3 box based on that, on the components that you were working on up above. Okay, so at the end of the day, our facts tell a story, right? They tell, but they don't sell. Stories are what sells. So now I need you to tell your nonprofit story in a way that inspires other people to action, right? And that's what I want you to do in that last box on this page, is to come up with an action plan. What are you going to do to tell your nonprofit story? To get the word out. So I'm officially out of time, but if y'all have questions or want to chat afterwards, I'm happy to stick around. If you'd like a copy of the presentation, I will share that with the organizing team here too, so they can get that out to you. But I've enjoyed working with y'all today.